Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. And also, the Search for the Ancient Bauble Kickstarter has launched, so make sure you go check that out. The Kickstarter campaign will last for 30 days, and after that, the playmat will no longer be available for purchase. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So in this spoiler season, we've got to see some incredible and some really unexpected things. On my episode from this morning, I talk about Soul Talisman, and I answer the question, is this another Soul Ring? And we've also seen another really unexpected thing with Esper Sentinel, which just might be White's Rhystic Study. That's right, you heard me, card draw in mono white. And we've also seen an incredibly powerful new sword in the sword cycle with Sword of Hearth and Home. But out of every single card that we've seen in Modern Horizons 2 so far, Dauthi Voidwalker might just take the cake. So is this card the most overpowered card out of the entire Modern Horizons 2 set? Well, let's jump into it to find out. Dauthi Voidwalker is a 3/2 Dauthi Rogue with Shadow that costs black. It says if a card will be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, instead exile it with a void counter on it. And tap sacrifice Dauthi Voidwalker, choose an exiled card an opponent owns with a void counter on it. You may play it this turn without paying its mana cost. So there's a lot going on in this 2 mana card, so let's break it down. First off, you're already getting a decent body for the mana cost with a 3/2 for 2 mana. Secondly, it has Shadow, which means that this creature can block or be blocked only by creatures with Shadow. Essentially, for the purposes of this card, it's just unblockable. Outside of this card, which is going to see a ton of play, which we'll get to that here in a bit, there aren't really that many cards that are played that have Shadow. So although it can't block, which is fine, it's not going to be able to be blocked, which is fantastic. And now to the next part, which is a huge graveyard hoser against our opponents. If a card will be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, it doesn't matter if it's from the hand, from play, from the top of the library, wherever it's going into the graveyard, it's gone. So let's just recap. We've got a 3/2 for only 2 mana that is unblockable that can hose our opponent's graveyards. That is already fantastic. But of course, Dauthi Voidwalker is nowhere near done. Because when those cards do get exiled, they get exiled with void counters on them. And then whenever we feel like it, whenever we exile a particularly powerful card with a void counter on it, well, we can just tap and sacrifice Dauthi Voidwalker. By doing that, we can choose that exiled card that has a void counter on it, and we can play it this turn without paying its mana cost. There are a lot of things about this card that make it unnecessarily overpowered. One of them being even just making you have to pay for that mana cost of the card that you're going to be casting. But no, this card is absolutely no downside, and it's entirely upside. Again, let's just recap one more time with everything now. This is a 3/2 unblockable creature for 2 mana that hoses your opponent's graveyards and also lets you cast the most powerful thing out of everything it's exiled for free. All again for 2 mana. When I saw this card and finally got done reading it for probably about the 3rd time just so I could make sure that I was taking it all in, my first question in my head was, what in the world were they thinking when they made this? It seems like they just kept stapling things onto a card and didn't really consider about the overall power level of it when they were done. I mean, there's definitely such thing as a push card, and then there's this. I mean, did they start off with, okay, this is a 3/2 creature that's basically unblockable for just 2 mana? Yeah, okay, that's decent, but you know what? We could spice it up just a little more. Let's add on some graveyard hate. And you know what? Instead of just having creatures exile when they die, let's have, any card that goes in your opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it. Okay, so we've got this now, and that's still not good enough. Okay, how about we exile them with a certain kind of counter that this can interact with? Okay, so then maybe you can kind of cash this Dauthi Voidwalker in for one of those cards that you exiled with one of those counters. Yeah, so maybe you can cast that spell until the end of the turn, and you can use any of your mana as mana of any color to cast it. No, that's nowhere near good enough. You know what, let's just have them cast it for free, okay? Yeah, okay, that sounds great. It's literally like they weren't even trying to hide just how overpowered this card is. You get it down early, you can get damage in, and you can hose your opponent's graveyards, and then when you need to, you can get rid of this to get something much better into play. In my opinion, this card is going to be incredibly expensive and see an absurd amount of play. Oh, how far we've come in Magic, even in just the past decade or so. I mean, back then we got another Dauthi, this one being Dauthi Slayer, a 2/2-ish shadow for black, and it has to attack each turn if able. Same cost, less power, and a downside instead of a stupid amount of upside. I mean, you can just slap this in pretty much any deck that has black and it's gonna be effective. You don't even need to really build around it to do that. It just happens to hose graveyard strategies, so if one of your friends likes playing graveyard decks, well, they're gonna be in trouble. Even without that though, whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery, yeah, you're basically getting access to it. Or if one of their permanents gets blown up, yes, you get access to that too. So one of their powerful creatures just died, and you know what? You very much would like that card, so here you go, it's yours now. All because you just played this little 2-drop that was dishing out unblockable damage. Now, of course, this card does get even better when it's built around or when you've got certain things in your deck that already work with it. Even just a simple kill spell like Hero's Downfall can be very impactful. It says destroy target creature or planeswalker, so this is basically, yeah, destroy that, it's exiled, and you can get it later if you want it. Or how about a good draw spell like Siphon Mine, which says each other player discards a card, you draw a card for each card discarded this way. Each player discards a card, and then that card is exiled and you get access to it as well. Or if you're in a mill deck, something like Ghoulcaller's Bell, which makes each player mill a card, yep, now you're getting access to those cards too. Again, I would really love to hear the thought process around designing this card. It's just generically very powerful in pretty much any deck without even any thought behind how you're going to use it. It's kind of like a combination of a lot of things, but also kind of unlike anything else. So let's talk about those cards that it's kind of like really quick. First up, the exile effect from it definitely reminded me of Leyline of the Void. It says, if it's in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield, and if a card be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. So obviously this one can be even quicker at exiling your opponent's things if this is in your opening hand. But still, essentially a Leyline of the Void on turn 2 with the new Dauthi is not bad either. And again, Leyline of the Void doesn't give you access to those cards, Dauthi does. So, in letting you cast your opponent's things, it's kind of like a Diluvian Primordial or a Chaos Wand or a Mind's Dilation. Diluvian has when it enters the battlefield, for each opponent you may cast up to one target instant or sorcery card from that player's graveyard without paying its mana cost. So this one can cast up to 3 cards, but it does have the requirement of those cards being in an opponent's graveyard. And again, unlike Dauthi, this one is limited to just instants and sorceries, which Chaos Wand also is too. It has pay 4 and tap it, target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile an instant or sorcery card. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. So the name on this card is very fitting, as it is kind of chaotic that you don't know what you're gonna hit. And speaking of not knowing what you're gonna hit, there's Mind's Dilation. It says whenever an opponent casts their first spell each turn, that player exiles the top card of their library. If it's a non-land card, you may cast without paying its mana cost. So unlike the other two, and like Dauthi, you're not limited to just instants and sorceries. And this can get you more than one card, but it is limited to hitting you a card off the top. And actually, I didn't mention this earlier, but I probably should have because it is noteworthy. It does say play it this turn. And that means it could get you a land if you really wanted it. So on top of all the other things it does, it could just be a 2-mana ramp spell getting you someone else's fetch land. And actually, although you do have to sacrifice this to get its effect, you are in black, so you can go get it back with a lot of things. And by getting it back into play, you have access to all those cards that you previously had access to. When this left the battlefield, those exiled cards with void counters on them didn't go away, so you still have access to them again. So yeah, there's plenty of ways to cast multiple spells with this for free throughout the game. Now, as I said before, there are going to be a ton of commanders that are really going to want this card because again, it's just generically good pretty much no matter what you do with it. But let's get into some specifics and talk about some commanders that can really utilize a card like this. The first one that I want to bring up is a rogue tribal commander with Anawan the Ruined Thief. He's a 2/4 vampire rogue that has other rogues you control get +1/+1. And whenever one or more rogues you control deal combat damage to a player, that player mills a card for each 1 damage dealt to them. If the player mills at least 1 creature card this way, you draw a card. Yeah, Dauthi Voidwalker is absolutely perfect in basically every way for Anawan. First up, it's going to be a 4/3 for 2 mana now thanks to the Anthem effect. And a wand also has a combat damage trigger whenever a rogue hits an opponent, and yes, Dauthi Voidwalker is a rogue. So then that player is gonna mill 4 cards. So yeah, anytime that you hit any of your opponents with your rogues, you are giving Dauthi Voidwalker access to more and more cards. So have fun casting your opponent's most absurd card. Next up, how about everyone's favorite, Muldrotha the Gravetide? She's a 6/6 elemental avatar that says during each of your turns you may play up to 1 permanent card of each permanent type from your graveyard. So Muldrotha decks like to utilize their graveyard essentially as a second hand. You can use and abuse certain artifacts and enchantments that can help you destroy a lot of permanents. So you destroy some powerful things, and then they exile, and then you use your Dauthi Voidwalker to cast them. And then you know for just 2 mana, you can recast Dauthi from your graveyard thanks to Muldrotha. And you can just keep doing this over and over again. Speaking of which, there's Marin of Clan Neltoth. She's a 3/4 human shaman that says whenever another creature you control dies, you get an experience counter. And at the beginning of your end step, choose target creature card in your graveyard. If that card's converted mana cost is less than or equal to the number of experience counters you have, return to the battlefield. Otherwise, put in your hand. So first off, when you do sacrifice Dauthi, you're getting experience counters with Marin. And secondly, Marin can easily get you Dauthi back over and over again like Muldrotha, but you don't even have to pay for Dauthi this time. But now let's move on to a fantastic mill commander with Phoenix, God of Deception. Phoenix is a 4/7 indestructible god that says as long as your devotion to blue and black is less than 7, Phoenix isn't a creature. And then creatures you control have tapped, target player puts the top X card to their library into their graveyard where X is that creature's toughness. So with the right deck built around this, you can mill your opponent's libraries in absolutely no time, and again with Dauthi, you're just going to be getting those cards into exile with void counters on them that you now have access to. So you can keep getting more and more cards there that give you more and more options for a fantastic card to steal. Or how about the adorable little skeleton rogue with Tiny Bones Trinket Thief? Tiny Bones is a 1/2 that says at the beginning of each end step, if an opponent discarded a card this turn, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. Then by paying 4 black, each opponent with no cards in hand loses 10 life. This commander is all about forcing your opponents to discard a ton of cards. So again, with Dauthi in play, you're ensuring that your opponents can't get those cards back, and then you also get access to those cards too. Even a simple mono-black commander like Visara the Dreadful can utilize Dauthi. Visara is a 5/5 Gorgon with flying that has tap destroy target creature, it can't be regenerated. So now essentially you can take out the best creatures on the board and steal them with Dauthi Voidwalker. I mean, the list could go on and on and on with a commander like Crick Son of Yawgmoth, but yeah, basically there are a lot of decks out there that could utilize Dauthi Voidwalker. Now it's time for me to give you my final thoughts on this card, and I think they've been pretty clear throughout the episode, but just in case, let me wrap them up. This card is incredibly overpowered. It literally seems like they kept stapling things onto the card and just like, never revised it. They just kept like, making it better and better and better and never actually kind of, evaluated how good this actually is. Not only does it hose graveyard decks, in which there are a lot of graveyard decks out there in Commander, but it also gives you a huge upside. Again, even just by playing this with nothing else being synergistic around it, you are exiling your opponent's cards that they, get into the graveyard from anywhere. It could be cast, it could be discarded, it could be milled, whatever it is, you're exiling their cards and then you're getting access to those cards. So it gives you a lot of utility early, and then yeah, you can just get the best card and basically steal it later. And then you can do that again if you keep getting this back. Oh yeah, and it's unblockable, and only 2 mana, and it's got 3 power. Okay. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if I'm trying to wrap this all up, this card is stupidly overpowered. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So the comments below, let me know your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.